Hello again, everybody. Jim Hickey, a.k.a. Doc Bass, coming at you with another bass fishing tip. This time about how different areas of the country have different types of reservoirs that are found there, and basically identifying what is a simple reservoir classification system, for all of us bass fishermen to make use of as we're planning our different trips across, again, different parts of this great land. And this didn't originate with me. This actually originated, I think, with the folks at In-Fisherman magazine back in the, 1970s and 1980s. And what they did is they came up with these 6 major primary types of reservoir systems based on the structures, the nature of the terrain, the nature of the landscape in which these things were created, because that controls the type of structure and the type of cover you'd find there. The 6 primary classes include canyon-type reservoirs, flatland, highland, hillland, lowland, and plateau. But there's another type here that they kind of mention, but they don't go into any great detail, which I'll go into a little bit here, and that's those reservoirs where you have a mixture of those characteristics. And I'll give you an example of each one of these. First up, canyon reservoirs. Classic, Lake Powell down in the southwestern part of this country, on the border between Utah and Arizona. This is a canyon reservoir. It is following an inundated portion of the Colorado River, and it is very, it's very narrow. It looks like the original course of the Colorado. And as this inset shows you up here, this inset photo, this is how those canyons look. You're fishing basically rock bluffs, talus slopes, degree piles of rock that's actually fallen down to the water, all throughout this whole system. Very clear, very deep, great fishery. For those of you in other parts of the country, it takes a little getting used to, but again, it's well worth the effort. Largemouth, smallmouth, thick a few spots, striped bass, amazing place. Next up are the flatlands. One place to think about this would be the southern part of this country, the southeast, especially as we get close to the coastline. The terrain is relatively flat, just like these flatland reservoirs. Here's a classic largemouth fishery, Lake Seminole, down on the border between Florida and Georgia. Lots of standing timber, lots of vegetation, creek channel here, might be old road beds in these types of structures because this area was previously developed. Again, a totally different situation. Next up on the list, highland. These exist in areas where you're getting up into the mountains, where you get a lot of change in topography and a lot of different river systems feeding into the main system. When these areas inundate, you have bluff areas, you have shale bank areas. When you get back in the coves, you have some flooded timber, flooded areas of chunk rock along the bank. A great fishery, in this case Dale Hollow, classic smallmouth fishery, and it provided or gave up the world record smallmouth bass of 11 pounds and 15 ounces. Next, hillland reservoirs. Between the flatland and the highland are places where you get rolling hills, parts of Texas and here in northern Missouri. We have some classic hillland reservoirs around here. Mazingo Lake, close to my home. Smithville Reservoir, down outside of Kansas City. These are areas where you have, the upper ends are relatively shallow, lots of flooded timber, lots of different type of vegetation. Might be a lot of humps out here within the lake that are again vegetated or brush covered. Great fisheries, usually full of largemouth bass, which is what we find up here and down in Texas at a classic place, San Rayburn and Toledo Bend. Another great fishery, but a totally different environment. Next up, lowland reservoirs. And when I think of these things, I think swamps. This one, a smaller one, found in southeastern Massachusetts, West Meadows, relatively shallow. I think the deepest point in this lake is only 7 or 8, maybe 10 feet deep. Lots of flooded brush and timber around the edges, lots of different type of vegetation. Hard to find the channels that's coming through here, but a great fishery. Caught a lot of great bass out of this lake when I lived up there in Massachusetts. Last out of the formal classification system, plateau reservoirs, and a classic is Lake McConaughey out in Nebraska, a flooded portion of the North Platte River. Normally, if this lake was at full pool, you'd see a bunch of small coves and cuts here where the water had flooded up its entire length. It's been dry out there. The lake levels are down. The good news is this year, good snowpack in the Rockies means there's probably going to be higher level water levels out in these types of reservoirs here, Lake Powell, and other places out west. Great largemouth fishery. Next up is when we get out of the 6 primary classes into one of these mixed types of reservoirs, where the northern part of this reservoir is canyon-like, just like Lake Powell. The southwestern part of this lake would be more like the Hilland reservoirs, where you get a lot of standing brush and different types of vegetation and so forth. A lot of rock structures up here, totally different down here. This is Lake Conchas down in northeastern New Mexico, one of these mixed types of reservoirs. Well, I hope you found this or a little video in these bass tips on the different types of reservoirs and the types of structures you might find in those different types of reservoirs helpful. If you'd like more information, check out my blog, bassfishingtipsandtactics.com/blog. There's a little more in-depth article and video there about this very subject. Have a wonderful day.